So the first of the scriptures we're going to be thinking about is a little verse in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. But I wanted to read to you chapter 4 because I think it gives a little bit of context to the verse that we're going to be looking at. So Micah chapter 4, and we'll start from the first verse of this chapter and then read through to Micah 5, verse 2. And Micah says, "In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. It will be raised up above the hills, and peoples will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between many peoples and settle disputes for strong nations far and wide. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war any more. Every man will sit under his own vine and under his own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, for the Lord Almighty has spoken. All the nations may walk in the name of their gods. We will walk in the name of the Lord our God, forever and ever. In that day, declares the Lord, I will gather the lame, I will assemble the exiles, and those I have brought to grief. I will make the lame a remnant, those driven away a strong nation. The Lord will rule over them in Zion, from that day and forever. As for you, a watchtower of the flock, O stronghold of the daughter of Zion, the former dominion will be restored to you. Kingship will come to the daughter of Jerusalem. Why do you now cry aloud? Why do you cry aloud? Have you no king? Has your counselor perished? What that pain seizes you like that of a woman in labor? Writhe in agony, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor. For now you must leave the city to camp in the open field. You will go to Babylon. There you will be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you out of the land of your enemies. But how many nations are gathered against you? They say, 'Let her be defiled. Let our eyes gloat over Zion.' But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord. They do not understand his plan, he who gathers them like sheaves to the threshing floor. Rise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will give you horns of iron. I will give you hooves of bronze, and you will break to pieces many nations. You will devote their ill-gotten gains to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of all the earth. Marshal your troops, O city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you be small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times." One of our family traditions, and we've already done this year, is to bring down from the loft our box of Christmas books for children. And we started reading them on Wednesday, the 1st of December. One of my favourites, and I think it might come up on screen if Andrew can get it, is Tickly Pig, Tickly Christmas, Wibbly Pig. And it tells a story of how Wibbly Pig always gets a gift from his Aunt Lali at Christmas. The first year, it was a knitted scarf. The second year, it was one knitted mitten. The next year, it was the other knitted mitten. And so he's thinking with his friends, what am I going to get this year? And one of them suggests, well, I'm sure it's going to be a hat. But unlike the other years, this year, Aunt Lali is going to turn up as well. So she turns up on the doorstep, knocks the door, and there she is standing with a knitted hat on, a scarf, and a knitted coat that she's made for herself. And Wibbly Pig says, "You're wearing my present," because he's expecting a woolly hat. And she laughs and says, "No, I'm not wearing your present. I made this for myself. I've brought you something totally different. And she gives him a really lovely present that's much more fun than a woolly hat. I won't tell you what it is because that'll spoil the book for you. You can... All right then, it's a sledge, okay? And he has great fun on the sledge. It was an expected present, but also it was unexpected for Wibbly Pig. The Jewish people were expecting a gift from God, Israel's son, if you like, a Messiah. It was an expected present, but as we will see from Micah, it wasn't quite what they expected. The prophet Micah, you might have wondered what some of those words were that I was reading, prophesied in the second part of the 8th century BC, between 750 and 700 BC. And this was a time when the original kingdom of Israel, which had been united under King David, was then divided again after his son Solomon had died. And Micah prophesied to the southern kingdom, which we call Judah, and other prophets also prophesied to the southern kingdom. Isaiah was another one for the southern kingdom. For the northern kingdom, the north part, Amos and Hosea were a couple of the prophets who prophesied there. And it was a time when the two kingdoms were actually enjoying times of prosperity. Things were good, particularly if you were in the upwardly mobile set. Things were going well. Your focus was on the good life and on enjoying yourself. But for the poor and those on the margins, things were tough. It was a time where the selfishness of those in power and influence meant that the very social and economic system that God had set up for God's people in order for them to really flourish as a nation was being eroded and dismantled. It happened subtly at first, with the rich ignoring their obligations to the poor and the marginalised, but it ended up with corruption and bribery and outright exploitation of the vulnerable. And their worship, when they gathered together, as they continued to do, was purely a veneer for a rotten core that was underneath. And Micah was called by God to speak truth to power into this situation, to point out the things that were wrong in the nation, challenging the indifference to the poor, the hollow worship, the corruption, the exploitation, and talking about judgment, of a time of purifying after judgment, of forgiveness, and then of restoration when Messiah came. And so we reach this verse in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. You, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. This was the one who would begin and one day finish God's work of putting right all that had gone wrong. I mentioned at the beginning that the gift was expected, but it was also unexpected. And it was unexpected in three ways. First of all, it was from an unexpected place. You, Bethlehem Ephrathah. The reference to Bethlehem is significant. Elsewhere, Isaiah tells us that the deliverer would come from David's line. And of course, David was born, wasn't he, in Bethlehem. That was his hometown. But if you were looking for a place where a king would be born, Bethlehem would not be it. Even in David's time, Bethlehem was insignificant. It was so insignificant that when Joshua, the great leader after Moses, conquered the land, he drew up a list of 115 cities, towns, and their villages. And Bethlehem didn't even get a mention. That's how insignificant Bethlehem was. And Micah's reference to Bethlehem as a birthplace for the promised deliverer, Israel's son, was a powerful pointer to the way that God raises up weak things, insignificant things, and uses them for his purposes. It was out of this insignificant town, out of the insignificant original family of David, that Messiah would come. It's also worth noting that this Messiah didn't just have an historic link to David, but it speaks about origins which are of old. And that word old there is used of God elsewhere in the Old Testament, indicating strongly that this deliverer didn't just have a link to David, but he had a divine heritage too. In 2008, the year after Sabre and I were married, we were treated to a holiday in Canada, and we went to Calgary to catch the train from Calgary to Vancouver. And we had a tour around Calgary, and the tour guide told us this was 20 years in 2008 since Calgary 1988, when the Winter Olympics had been held there. And they were having great celebrations in the town 20 years on. And the people that they put on their invite list, the first ones who got put on the invite list were the two people who were up there. You may recognise them. Do any of you recognise them? We've got Eddie the Eagle, haven't we? And the Cool Runnings team, the Jamaican bobsleigh team, who got there beyond all expectations. It was amazing that the first people on their list were not the medalists, but actually the glorious failures. And yet somehow those people had captured the public imagination. It's a reminder, you know, that in God's economy, it's the weak things and the vulnerable things that actually, more often than not, God uses. Little old Bethlehem, who would have thought it? And yet it gives us hope, doesn't it? Paul later on would say to the Corinthians, brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world, the despised things, and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one could boast before him. And that was the story of the Christmas story as well, wasn't it? It was insignificant, overlooked people that God used. The Marys, the Zacharias, the Elizabeths, the Simeons, the Annas, even the Magi, who were foreigners. All of those people God used. The second thing is that the gift had an unexpected scope. We always enjoyed my paternal grandmother, Gran, as we used to call her, coming at Christmas. She was so generous with her gifts to us. But there was one parcel she used to bring that we really looked forward to. It was called the Mystery Parcel. And inside, it was a mystery, not only because it was wrapped up, but it was also a mystery because we didn't know who sent it. And when we pressed my gran, she would never tell us whether she knew or not. She would just simply say it was left on the doorstep, addressed to Ben and Rachel and family, Ben and Rachel, my mum and dad. And when we opened this box, there were a number of gifts in there. There was something for everyone, and we used to love going through it and thinking, this is for me, this is for so-and-so. We rarely squabbled. It was just fun dividing up the spoils. There was a tendency, and it was still very prevalent in Jesus' day, that Messiah was only for the Jewish people. Messiah was exclusively theirs. Even the disciples were of the view that it was primarily a national deliverance rather than a universal one that Jesus had come to bring. They said to Jesus before he went up to heaven, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Messiah is for us. I deliberately read Micah 4 because at the beginning it talks about the fact that in the last days the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established. This is talking about Israel's son too. and many peoples will stream to it. Many nations will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord." Because Israel's son was for Israel, yes, but he was also for everyone. He was for everyone. And we do well to remember that as Christians too at Christmas, don't we? Jesus is for everyone, not just for those we get on with, for those like us, but for everyone. And I always find that I'm enriched and blessed by the diversity and the blessings that others bring. Tim Keller refers to some similar verses in Isaiah 60, talking about the ultimate fulfillment when Jesus will come back and how each nation's heritage will bring something wonderful to that great day and the future. The image here, he says, is of each nation's unique cultural riches, splendours and glories being brought into the new creation. These visions of the final age show that our racial and cultural distinctions are part of God's good creation and so important that they will be carried over into the new creation, not eradicated, but purified. All of the sinful distortions, just as our bodies with their distinctions, will be purified from all weakness and decay. And what he's saying there is that everyone is being welcomed by Messiah. Everyone has something to bring to the table. One of my abiding memories in my old church was of a young black Nigerian guy called Daniel, who came to our church and was with us for 2 or 3 years. And we adopted him into our extended family, so much so that he used to call my mum his second mother. And we learnt so much from him. But my abiding memory is of the last occasion he was with us. It was a midweek prayer meeting, and our minister said, "Daniel's got something to share with us before he leaves." And with that, Daniel came to the front. And through his tears, and through our tears as we listened, he sung a simple song that we used to sing back in the 70s and 80s. And it was, "I love you with the love of the Lord. Yes, I love you with the love of the Lord. I can see in you the glory of my King. And I love you with the love of the Lord." And I'm looking forward to the day where I will be united with Daniel and with a whole load of other people, probably not in this life because we've lost touch with him, but certainly in the life to come. Because the scope of the blessing of Israel's son is for everyone. And the third thing is that this gift has an unexpected priority. As we look at the darkness around us, we are faced with, and our response to it, there's a little phrase that stood out for me. "Out of you will come for me." This is God speaking through Micah. For me. And it's just that reminder, that everything we do as Christians primarily is for God. It's entirely right that we reach out to those in need, for those who are marginalised and overlooked. And in a sense, we do it for them. But ultimately, we do it for God, because that's what Jesus did. That was his priority. There's a picture of a rather venerable gentleman here, Joseph Haydn. And he was at the performance in his last years of a piece that he wrote called The Creation. It was an oratorio where the creation story is told in song. And he was brought in a wheelchair. And as the majestic work moved along, the audience was caught up with the tremendous emotion. And when the passage came, "Let there be light," the chorus and orchestra burst forth with such power that the crowd could no longer restrain themselves. And the vast assembly rose in spontaneous applause. And Haydn struggled to stand and motioned for silence. And with his hand, he pointed towards heaven and said, "No, no, not for me. From thence comes all." And having given glory and praise to the Creator, he fell back in his chair, exhausted. It's just that reminder, that whatever we do primarily is for Jesus, is for God. We start by loving him with all our heart, mind, soul and strength. It is for him. And Jesus himself said, "I've come to glorify my Father." That's why I've come. The hour has come. Glorify your Son, said Jesus, that your Son may glorify you. Above everything, Israel's Son doesn't just come for Israel or even for the world. He comes because that is his Father's will. Primarily, always, his Father came first. As we enter this Advent season and get caught up with the celebrations, the planning, the often frantic days where we're trying to fit all sorts of different things into our schedules, I want to ask you, what are you hoping for from Jesus this Christmas? I believe that Jesus will be present with us as Emmanuel, God with us, as he always is. But the question is, will we miss him? Or will we have our eyes open to see him? Present in our homes, present in our schools, present in our streets, in our communities, in the shops, in the hospitals, in the programmes on TV, present here with us at TBC. My prayer is that as we anticipate the coming of Jesus into this world, we will have eyes to see the unexpected ways that Jesus is at work, and have the willingness to partner with him in whatever we find him doing. Shall we pray? God of the promised but unexpected gift, give us eyes to see you at work among us this Christmas. Move us, we pray, to willingly and joyfully partner with you. Jesus, the baby who came to earth in Bethlehem and still comes among us in unexpected ways. And so may we live hope-filled lives, secure in the knowledge that one day Jesus will return again in person to restore and renew all things. Keep us watching and waiting faithfully for that great day. Amen.